Have you ever wondered why some of America's most powerful engines just disappeared? What if I told you that in 1958, while Chevy was still playing with small blocks, Lincoln quietly unleashed a monster that made everything else look like toys? We're talking about an engine so massive, so over-engineered, that it literally weighed 3/4 of a ton. Today we're counting down 20 shocking secrets about the Lincoln MEL 430 big block, the forgotten giant that powered everything from luxury barges to championship drag racers. And trust me, by the time we get to number 1, you'll understand why Ford tried so hard to make people forget this beast ever existed. Hit that subscribe button if you love automotive mysteries, because this countdown is about to blow your mind. Number 20. The mystery of the MEL name. Here's something that'll make you scratch your head. MEL doesn't stand for some fancy engineering term or a brilliant inventor's name. Nope. It literally means Mercury Edsel Lincoln. That's it. Just 3 car brands mashed together. But here's the kicker. This wasn't some committee decision made in a boardroom. Ford engineers started calling it that on the shop floor, and it stuck. The official designation was actually the Lincoln Y block replacement engine. Try saying that 5 times fast. But the workers at Lima, Ohio, where these monsters were built, they just called it MEL. Sometimes the best names are the ones that happen by accident, and this accidental name would go on to represent one of the most unique engine families Ford ever created. A family that broke every rule about how a big block should be designed. Number 19. The insane weight nobody talks about. Let's talk about something Ford definitely didn't advertise. This engine was heavy, and I mean heavy. We're not talking about your typical big block weight here. One documented pullout from a 1960 Continental tipped the scales at 724 pounds, fully dressed. That's not a typo. 724 pounds of pure iron. For comparison, a Chevy 454 big block weighs about 680 pounds. The MEL 430 was literally carrying around an extra 44 pounds of metal. Why? Because Ford engineers decided to use a deep skirt block design that extended way below the crankshaft center line. They wanted strength. They got it. But they also got an engine that could double as a boat anchor. Mechanics hated working on these things. You needed a heavy-duty engine hoist just to pull one out. And forget about doing a quick engine swap in your driveway. This wasn't an engine. It was a monument to excess. Number 18. The first 400 horsepower production engine. Everyone thinks the Chrysler 300 letter cars were the horsepower kings of the 50s. Wrong. In 1958, the Super Marauder version of the MEL 430 became the first American production car engine rated at 400 horsepower. Not 390, not 395, a full 400 horses. And this was during a recession year when people were supposedly buying economy cars. Lincoln didn't care. They slapped 3 2-barrel carburetors on top of that 430 and called it the Super Marauder. The marketing guys must have been drunk. Who releases a 400 horsepower engine during the worst economic downturn since the Depression? Lincoln, that's who. But here's the really crazy part. They barely advertised it. While Chrysler was shouting about their 392 Hemi from the rooftops, Lincoln quietly offered more power and acted like it was no big deal. It's like they built the most powerful engine in America and then forgot to tell anyone about it. Number 17. The combustion chamber that broke all the rules. This is where things get weird, really weird. Ford engineers looked at conventional combustion chamber design and said, nah, we're going to do something completely different. Instead of putting the combustion chamber in the cylinder head like literally every other manufacturer, they put it in the block. The deck surface was machined at a 10-degree angle. The cylinder head was completely flat. The piston top determined the compression ratio. If this sounds insane, that's because it was. Chevy tried something similar with their W motor 348 and 409, but even Chevy kept their valves canted. Not Ford. They kept inline valves with shaft-mounted rockers. It was like they took the worst ideas from both designs and somehow made them work. The result? An engine that breathed differently than anything else on the road, and mechanics who had no idea what they were looking at when they pulled the heads off for the first time. Number 16, the open runner. Intake that defied logic. Most engines of this era used exhaust crossovers to warm up the intake mixture. It helped with cold starts and fuel atomization. Basic stuff. The MEL 430? Ford said forget all that. They designed an open runner intake manifold with zero exhaust heating. None. In an era when carburetors were primitive and fuel injection was science fiction, this was borderline crazy. Cold starts were brutal. The engine would stumble and cough until it warmed up. But Ford had a reason. They wanted maximum airflow, period. To seal off the lifter valley, they used a separate stamped steel cover. More parts, more complexity, more weight, but also more power. It's like Ford engineers were playing a completely different game than everyone else. While other manufacturers focused on drivability and refinement, Ford just wanted to move air. Lots and lots of air. Number 15, the secret marine engine empire. Here's something Ford never talked about. While they were selling MEL 430s and Lincolns and Thunderbirds, Chris Craft was buying them by the truckload for boats. Not just any boats, high-end luxury cruisers. The marine world loved these engines. Why? Torque. Mountains of it. At low RPM, these engines produced stump-pulling power perfect for moving heavy boats through water. Chris Craft sold them as 430 and 431 cubic inch options. The marine versions got special cooling systems and corrosion-resistant components. But the basic engine was the same monster that powered Lincolns. Imagine buying a 50-foot yacht in 1962 and finding out it had the same engine as a Continental. That's exactly what happened, and boat owners loved it. These engines would run forever at constant RPM. The deep skirt block design that made them heavy also made them incredibly durable. Some of these marine MELs are still running today, 60 years later. Number 14, the Thunderbird connection nobody expected. In 1959, something strange happened. Ford decided the Thunderbird needed more power. Not just any power, Lincoln power. They stuffed the massive MEL 430 into the relatively small Thunderbird body. It barely fit. The engine bay was packed so tight you could barely see the valve covers, but Ford didn't care. They marketed it as the Thunderbird 430 Special. Special was right. This was like putting a locomotive engine in a sports car. The weight distribution was all wrong. The handling was interesting. But straight line acceleration? Brutal. These T-Birds would absolutely demolish anything else on the road in a stoplight drag race. The funny part? Ford acted like this was totally normal. Their ads showed elegant couples cruising in their 430-powered Thunderbirds like it wasn't completely insane to have that much engine in a personal luxury car. Only Ford would think this made sense. Number 13, the two-barrel carburetor experiment. By 1960, reality hit. The MEL 430 was thirsty. Really thirsty. Like 8 miles per gallon thirsty. Lincoln had a problem. So they did something unthinkable. They put a two-barrel carburetor on their flagship engine. A two-barrel on a 430 cubic inch engine. It was like putting a straw on a fire hose. Power dropped from 315 horsepower to, well, Lincoln never said exactly. They just mumbled something about adequate performance and changed the subject. But here's the thing, it actually worked. Sort of. Fuel economy improved to maybe 10 miles per gallon. Customers who bought the two-barrel version got a badge that said, Economy Engine, on a 5,000-pound Lincoln. The irony was completely lost on Ford's marketing department. These two-barrel 430s are incredibly rare today. Most were converted back to 4 barrels by owners who realized life's too short to drive a neutered Lincoln. Number 12. The bore spacing that enabled everything 4.90 inches. Remember that number. That's the bore spacing on the MEL engine family. For comparison, a Chevy big block has 4.84-inch bore spacing. That extra 0.06 inches might not sound like much, but it changed everything. This massive bore spacing allowed Ford to build multiple engine sizes on the same block: 383, 410, 430, 462, all using the same basic architecture, just change the bore and stroke. The 4.9-inch spacing gave engineers room to work, room for bigger valves, room for thicker cylinder walls, room for error. It's why these engines could handle massive power increases without braking. Drag racers figured this out quick. You could bore a ML block way beyond factory specs, and it would still hold together. That bore spacing wasn't an accident. Ford engineers were thinking ahead. They built an architecture that could grow, and grow it did. Number 11. The dual thermostat mystery. Open up the cooling system on a ML 430 and you'll find something weird. 2 thermostats, not 1. 2. Why? Because Ford engineers discovered these massive blocks had hot spots. The standard single thermostat setup couldn't regulate temperature evenly across all that iron. So they added a second one. But here's where it gets interesting. The 2 thermostats didn't always open at the same temperature. They were staged. One would open first, allowing partial flow. Then the second would open for full flow. It was complicated. It was over-engineered. It was pure Ford. Mechanics hated it. Customers never knew about it. But it worked. These engines ran at consistent temperatures even in Death Valley summer heat. The dual thermostat system was just another example of Ford solving problems nobody else even knew existed, or maybe creating solutions to problems they caused themselves. Either way, it was classic MEL engineering. Number 10. The supercharged dragster that changed everything. 1959. A guy named Jim Lytle shows up at the drag strip with something nobody had seen before. A front-engine dragster powered by a supercharged ML 430. Everyone laughed until he fired it up. The sound was ungodly. This wasn't the high-pitched scream of a small block. This was thunder, deep, chest-thumping thunder. When Lytle made his first pass, jaws dropped. The massive torque of the ML combined with the supercharger created acceleration that defied physics. He wasn't just winning. He was destroying the competition. Word spread fast. Suddenly, racers everywhere wanted MEL engines. But there was a problem. These engines were expensive, really expensive, and heavy. That weight that killed them on the street became an advantage in drag racing. More weight over the rear wheels meant better traction. The MEL 430 became the secret weapon nobody saw coming. Ford never officially supported this racing effort, but they didn't stop it either. Number 9. The Edsel connection that almost killed it. Here's a dirty little secret. The MEL engine family was supposed to save Edsel. In 1958, Edsel's top Citation and Corsair models got the MEL 410 engine. Ford called it the E475 because apparently Edsel needed its own special name for everything. This was supposed to give Edsel buyers Lincoln-level performance. The 410 made 345 horsepower. Respectable. But Edsel was already doomed. When Edsel died in 1959, it almost took the MEL engine family with it. Ford executives questioned why they needed this expensive, complex engine family. The program survived. Barely. But the Edsel connection haunted the MEL engines forever. In Ford's corporate culture, anything associated with Edsel was poison. The MEL 430 spent the rest of its life trying to live down that connection. It's ironic. The engine that was supposed to save Edsel ended up being tainted by Edsel's failure. Corporate politics at its finest. Number 8. The compression ratio shell game. Ford played games with compression ratios that would make a three-card Monte dealer jealous. In 1958, the ML 430 had 10.5 to 1 compression. By 1959, it dropped to 10.0 to 1, officially. But here's the thing, Ford kept changing how they measured it. Some years they included the combustion chamber volume in the head gasket. Some years they didn't. The 10-degree deck angle made calculations weird. Different pistons changed everything. By 1960, nobody really knew what the actual compression ratio was. Ford's own documentation contradicted itself. Service manuals showed one number, sales brochures showed another. Mechanics just shrugged and set the timing by ear. The real compression ratio depended on which head gaskets you used, how much the block had been decked, and whether the heads had been milled. It was chaos. But somehow, these engines still ran. That's the miracle of the ML. Even when nobody knew exactly what they were working with, they still made power. Number 7. The Lima, Ohio factory. Nobody remembers every MEL engine came from one place, Lima, Ohio. Ford's Lima engine plant was a fortress of iron and steel. This wasn't some converted tractor factory. This was purpose-built for making big engines. The Lima plant had its own foundry. They poured their own blocks, machined everything in-house. Quality control was obsessive. Each engine was hot-tested before shipping, not just run on a stand, actually heated to operate in temperature and run through full RPM ranges. The Lima workers took pride in these engines. They signed their work, literally. You can find inspector stamps and signatures inside ML blocks. These weren't just engines to them. They were monuments. When Ford shut down MEL production in 1968, it devastated Lima. These workers had spent a decade perfecting the art of building massive engines. The tooling was scrapped, the knowledge scattered. Today, nothing remains of the MEL production line. Lima builds other engines now, but old-timers still talk about the days when they built the biggest, baddest engines Ford ever made. Number 6. The 462 that made it obsolete. In 1966, Ford did something cruel. They built a bigger MEL, the 462. 462 cubic inches of the same basic design. More displacement, more power, more problems. The 462 was the MEL architecture pushed to its absolute limit. The bore was maxed out. The stroke was stretched. It made 340 horsepower and 485 pound-feet of torque. On paper, it was the ultimate MEL. In reality, it was a mistake. The extra displacement made the engine even heavier, even thirstier. The stress on the bottom end was enormous. These engines ate bearings like candy. By 1968, Ford had seen enough. The ML family was dead, replaced by the new 385 series that would become the 460. The 462 lasted just 3 years. It was the ML's last gasp, a final middle finger to efficiency and common sense. Today, 462 MLs are incredibly rare. Most were junked when they broke, which was often. Number 5. The Marine Racing Secret. While Ford ignored the MEL's racing potential, boat racers didn't. In the early 60s, offshore powerboat racing was exploding. These guys needed reliable power, lots of it. The ML 430 was perfect, but not the stock version. Racing teams discovered you could bore these engines to 460 cubic inches safely. The thick cylinder walls and massive bore spacing made it possible. Add racing cams, headers, and multiple carburetors, and you had 600 horsepower. In a boat, weight didn't matter. Reliability did. And these engines were bulletproof. They'd run wide open for hours without braking. One team ran a twin ML-powered boat from Miami to Nassau at full throttle. Both engines survived. Try that with any other 60s big block. The marine racing success was Ford's dirty secret. They couldn't advertise it because they'd officially abandoned performance, but racers knew. In the underground world of offshore powerboat racing, MEL engines were gold. They still are. Find a vintage offshore racer today, and there's a good chance it has MEL power. Number 4. The real reason production ended. Ford will tell you the MEL ended because the 385 series was better, lighter, more efficient, more modern. That's the official story. Here's the truth. The ML was too expensive to build. That deep skirt block used massive amounts of iron. The complex machining for the angled deck surface required special equipment. The separate valley cover added cost. The dual thermostats, the shaft-mounted rockers, it all added up. By 1967, Ford accountants calculated that each ML engine cost 40% more to manufacture than a comparable 390. 40%. In an era when profit margins on cars were razor-thin, this was death. The 385 series did everything cheaper. Simpler block design, conventional combustion chambers, standard coolant system. It made the same power for less money. The MEL never stood a chance. Ford killed it not because it was bad, but because it was too expensive to build. Classic Ford. Design an incredible engine, then let the bean counters destroy it. Number 3. The forgotten performance parts. After Ford killed the MEL, something strange happened. Performance parts started appearing, not from Ford, from independent companies. Edelbrock made intake manifolds. Crane developed radical cams. Headers appeared from multiple manufacturers. Why? Because racers had discovered something. These engines responded to modifications like nothing else. The massive bore spacing meant you could run huge valves. The deep skirt block could handle nitrous. The bottom end was strong enough for superchargers. By 1970, you could build a 1,000 horsepower MEL if you knew where to look for parts. But here's the thing. Ford pretended none of this existed. While they supported racing development for the FE and 385 engines, the MEL was orphaned. No factory performance parts, no racing program, nothing. The MEL became the underground hero. The engine Ford forgot, but racers remembered. Today, those vintage speed parts are worth fortunes. A rare MEL racing intake can sell for thousands, if you can find one. Number 2, the celebrity owners nobody mentions. Here's something Ford definitely didn't advertise. Elvis bought a MEL-powered Lincoln. So did Frank Sinatra. Dean Martin had 2. These weren't just cars to them. They were statements. In Hollywood's golden age, driving a MEL-powered Lincoln meant you'd made it. But it went deeper than that. These celebrities modified their cars. Elvis had his MEL rebuilt with racing parts. Sinatra's car had custom exhaust that made the engine sound even more menacing. They knew something the average buyer didn't. These engines had personality. They weren't just transportation. They were experiences. The way they idled with that distinctive lope. The tsunami of torque when you pressed the accelerator. The sound that made everything else seem weak. Ford could have used these celebrity connections in advertising. They didn't. Too controversial, too flashy, too un-Ford. So these stories stayed buried until now. The king of rock and roll chose MEL power. That tells you everything you need to know. Number 1, the modern revival nobody saw coming. Here's the shocking final secret. The MEL is back. Not from Ford, from hot rodders who've discovered these forgotten giants. In the last 5 years, MEL engines have exploded in popularity. Why? Because they're different. In a world of cookie-cutter LS swaps, dropping a MEL into anything is a statement. Plus, they're still cheap. You can buy a complete MEL 430 for less than a bare small block Chevy. The aftermarket has responded. New aluminum heads are available, modern fuel injection systems, stronger rotating assemblies. You can now build a MEL that makes 800 horsepower and actually runs on pump gas. Hot rodders are putting them in everything. Model A's, muscle cars, even modern trucks. The engine Ford tried to forget has become the ultimate sleeper power plant. And here's the kicker, they're appreciating fast. 5 years ago, a MEL 430 was scrap value. Today, good ones sell for thousands. Collectors have finally realized what they're looking at. The last of the old-school big blocks, the engine that broke all the rules, the forgotten giant that's finally getting its due. And there you have it, 20 shocking secrets about the Lincoln MEL 430 big block that Ford hoped you'd never discover. From its insane weight to its celebrity connections to its modern revival, this engine refuses to die. Did any of these revelations surprise you? Do you have a MEL story of your own? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into forgotten automotive history, smash that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We've got more hidden automotive treasures coming your way. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the best engines are the ones they don't want you to remember.